It hides in your goodness. It speaks through your light, and it loves to be praised for its humility. The ego never really dies. It just learns how to wear a halo. You won't notice it at first. You'll call it growth. You'll call it healing. There comes a moment on every spiritual path when the light you once trusted begins to flicker. Not because you've lost it, but because it begins to show you something it never revealed before. It shows you yourself, but not the self you wanted to find. Not the serene monk you imagined in meditation. Not the healed, glowing version of your higher consciousness. No, it shows you the ego not as the enemy you thought you had defeated, but as the companion who simply changed clothes. You see, the ego doesn't die during awakening. It adapts. It learns the language of light. It starts quoting scriptures. It learns the posture of humility, the vocabulary of love, the tone of stillness. It starts to wear your enlightenment like a costume. And in the silence that follows, you don't even notice the switch, because the ego is clever. It knows that direct pride is too visible, too crude, so it evolves into something. It becomes the spiritual ego, the one that smiles while judging, that teaches while still needing to be adored, but calls itself awakened while secretly starving for recognition. Carl Jung once wrote, "The most dangerous thing in life is not the darkness, but the light that blinds us to it." And this is the blindness he was warning about, the blindness of believing you have transcended what you have merely hidden when you first step onto the spiritual path. You think awakening means escaping the ego. You imagine light swallowing darkness, peace defeating chaos, love conquering fear. But that's not awakening. That's an escape fantasy. Because true awakening is not a victory march. It's a quiet disillusionment. It's the day you realize the same ego that once wanted wealth and attention now wants spiritual purity. It's the same hunger, just wearing whiter robes. You begin to feel it when someone praises your calmness, and you secretly enjoy it. When you say, "I'm beyond judgment," but deep inside, you're judging those who aren't. When you speak of love, but only to feel more evolved than those who hate, that's when you know your ego has found religion, and now it preaches your enlightenment. There's a strange beauty in this stage. It feels sacred. You meditate for hours. You talk about energy, soul, destiny. You start seeing yourself as a light worker, a guide, a healer. There comes a stage in every seeker's life when light begins to distort, not because it's false, but because it's reflected through something unseen. That something is virtu, the oldest mirror in the world. You look into it and see kindness, patience, empathy, the qualities you fought to grow, and they are real. You worked for them, you bled for them, but quietly, without your permission. The ego leans closer to the mirror and whispers, "Look how good you've become." That's where the distortion begins, because the moment you start admiring your reflection, you stop seeing what's behind it. At first, it feels innocent. You tell yourself, "I'm finally becoming a better person." You start helping more, forgiving more, giving more. And people notice. They praise your calmness, your compassion, your strength. Each compliment lands softly, like rain on thirsty soil. But slowly, the soil becomes addicted to the rain. You begin to crave it. Not openly, not consciously. It hides inside the silence between your good deeds, a secret longing for acknowledgement, to be seen as the kind one, the wise one, the healed one. Jung warned that the shadow often hides behind our greatest virtues. And he was right, because kindness can disguise cowardice, forgiveness can conceal superiority, and humility. Humility can be the most dangerous costume of all. When the ego wears humility, it doesn't bow to others. It bows to its own reflection. It starts collecting goodness like trophies. Every act of patience becomes proof of worth. Every moment of restraint becomes an offering to the self-image you've built. And soon, you're not forgiving people because your heart wants peace. You're forgiving them because your image wants purity. This is the mirror of virtue. Beautiful, polished, holy. But step too close, and you'll see that it doesn't reflect truth, only what you want to believe about yourself. The tragedy is subtle. You begin to confuse spiritual maturity with moral superiority. You believe the calmness in your tone means you've transcended the storm. But sometimes, calmness is just repression. Silence built from fear of losing control. You tell yourself, I don't judge anymore. Yet in that very sentence hides the judgment of those who still do. You say, I've moved beyond anger, but the anger didn't vanish. It just changed language. Now it speaks through indifference. Through cold, quiet dismissal. That's the ego's new weapon. Spiritual detachment. It convinces you that distance is enlightenment, that feeling less means being more evolved. But detachment without empathy isn't transcendence, it's armor. And armor, he prays, fasts, meditates, serves the poor. Finally, one night, he dreams of God. And in the dream, God says, you've been trying to be good so long, you've forgotten how to be real. That's the mirror of virtue. It shows you an image of perfection so radiant that you forget the rawness that made you human. The ego loves to be good, because goodness is socially untouchable. No one questions the saint. No one challenges the savior. And so the ego evolves into its most untouchable form, the enlightened persona. It doesn't demand attention anymore. It demands reverence. It wants to be the one who never loses their temper, never doubts, never falters. But that's not divinity. That's denial. Real awakening doesn't make you untouchable. It makes you touch everything. The pain, the fear, the jealousy, the pride. You stop pretending to be above them. You start walking through them. You don't seek to be flawless anymore. You seek to be whole. And that's when the mirror starts to crack. Each fracture shows a piece of yourself you'd abandon. The angry one. The needy one. The jealous one. The tired one. You realize they were never your enemies. They were just the parts of you that needed light the most. When you look into the cracked mirror, you don't see perfection anymore. You see truth. And truth, even when shattered, is more sacred than any flawless illusion. That's the moment the ego trembles, because now you've stopped feeding it validation. You've stopped needing to be the good one. You've started to be real. And the reality is something the ego cannot control. When you allow yourself to feel the whole spectrum, the love and the rage, the joy and the shame, you begin to embody what Jung called the self, the wholeness beyond the mask. And in that wholeness, the halo begins to fade. But don't be afraid. You're not losing light. You're losing illusion. The ego's final trick is to make you believe that if you stop trying to be good, you'll become bad. But the truth is simpler. When you stop trying to be good, you finally become honest. And honesty is the only purity that survives enlightenment. Because in the end, the divine doesn't want your performance. It wants your presence. It wants your sincerity. It wants the you that still trembles when it says, I don't know. That's the real virtue, not perfection, but There's a peculiar stillness that follows awakening. The storms quiet down. The mind softens. The heart, for the first time, you feel radiant, as though your breath carries light, and your silence holds answers. You begin to walk differently. Your words sound wiser. People listen, and something inside you hums in satisfaction. You tell yourself it isn't. Pride, it's grace. But grace doesn't hum like that. It doesn't whisper, I am chosen. That hum is the halo, forming at first its invisible jest. A soft glow of superiority you mistake for serenity. You start believing you've crossed the threshold, that you're no longer like them. The asleep, the unaware, the unawakened. And that's the moment the ego slips back onto its throne. Not in darkness, but bathed in divine light. Jung called it inflation, when the conscious mind identifies with the archetype of God, believing it has become something more than human. It's the oldest illusion in history. Saint's shadow. The halo illusion. You don't notice it growing. It happens quietly, gently, each time someone calls you wise, and you accept it. Each time someone confesses, "You've changed my life," and you absorb the credit instead of passing it through. It feels harmless, but that's how holiness decays. The light stops flowing through you and begins to orbit around you. It circles your head like a crown. And before you know it, you've become your own sun. The illusion deepens when others mirror it back. You become the spiritual friend, the one they turn to for calm words, for forgiveness, for peace. You begin to perform enlightenment instead of embodying it. You answer with patience, even when impatience claws at your chest. You smile gently, even when judgment burns beneath the calm. This is not hypocrisy, it's survival. The ego has found a new identity, the Holy One. You see, the ego doesn't care what it becomes, only that it remains the center of attention. It once said, "Look at me, I'm powerful." Now, it says, "Look at me, I'm pure." Same hunger, different costume. The halo illusion makes you believe of transcended duality, while secretly dividing the world into awakened and asleep. Itobat, unity, but only feel it with those who agree with you. You preach compassion, but quietly condemn those still lost in the dark. You tell yourself you've become light, but you've simply created a subtler shadow. That's the paradox Jung feared most when the archetype of light possesses the ego. He wrote, "The greatest danger of consciousness is the identification with its own light, because once you think you're the light, you stop letting it reveal what still hides in you. Stop growing. You stop listening. You start teaching instead. And soon, enlightenment becomes a role, a script, a brand you wear, serenity, like a signature scent soothing others while suffocating yourself. There's a quiet arrogance hidden in this glow. You stop apologizing. You stop doubting. Stop learning from pain because pain now feels beneath you. The halo makes you forget what awakening was meant to teach. That divinity is not a hierarchy, it's a remembrance. You don't rise above others. You sink deeper into them, into the same soil, the same hunger, the same humanity. When you forget that, your light becomes isolation. Your calm becomes distance. Your truth becomes a weapon. Think of the old mystics, the ones who disappeared into mountains, not because they wanted to escape the world, but because they feared their own followers. They knew what worship does. It feeds the halo, and when enough eyes call you holy, you begin to forget your name. The halo illusion doesn't always glow sometimes. It blinds. You stop noticing the people you hurt while trying to awaken them. You call it tough love, but it's just unacknowledged pride. You confuse truth-telling with superiority. You mistake detachment for wisdom. You start correcting others. If God whispers only to you, that's how the sacred turns, instead of when humility leaves the room. True light has no halo. It doesn't need to prove itself. It doesn't need witnesses. It simply is . And when it truly shines through you, it makes you smaller, not grander. It softens you, not hardens you. It humbly, not elevates. Because real illumination's about brightness, it's about transparency. You stop being the sun and become the window. Through you, light passes. Through you, it touches the world. But it is not you. The moment you understand that, the halo begins to fade. And in that fading, you start to see again. You see the smallness you'd tried to escape, the child who still fears being ordinary, the self that still longs for recognition, the heart that still wants to be chosen. You begin to love that self, not erase it. Because enlightenment isn't eraser, it's inclusion. The halo illusion D1, you remember your humanity. When you realize you're not the light, you're its vessel. And the vessel must remain humble, or it will crack under its own brightness. The ones who truly awaken rarely announce it. They move quietly through the world, like rain that doesn't need applause. They don't talk about light, they become the softness it leaves behind. They don't gather followers, they disappear into life, because awakening is not ascension, it's dissolution. Halo falso, that the eyes can see.